Ladies and gentlemen, you're so well behaved that you are much quieter than we anticipated. So sorry for the slight delay there. Very good morning. Good morning. Yeah, it's supposed to be very polite in the South. This is what I've been told. So, my name is Christopher Ludwig. I'm the content director at Automotive Logistics and AutomotiveIT International, and it's really my great pleasure to welcome you all here to Atlanta for what I think is going to be a very interesting couple of days here. This is an event very focused on the future, on changing technology and the impact it's having on this industry and indeed across industries. And so I'm kind of excited because at this moment I'm able to sort of defy the normal constraints of time and space. And I'm actually addressing two conferences simultaneously at the same time. But I'm not doing it via a hologram or some sort of digital twin. But it's because in this room we have speakers, sponsors, delegates from both the Automotive Logistics Supply Chain Conference and the Automotive IT International North America Conference. So we've basically done our best to bring together those with expertise in compute power, data, sensors, and software with the people who manage just-in-time, lean production, and deliver automotive products to market. So hopefully, you know, this is an interesting chance to sort of bring two worlds together, which really do work together and should be speaking together, but we're sort of forcing the issue perhaps a little bit more than is normal. So just a few words about each of those events. The Supply Chain Conference features leaders and innovators in automotive parts logistics. So we have speakers here today helping to set out a roadmap for the change we see in the supply chain and change in logistics. So you'll hear examples of manufacturers and service providers who are reevaluating their processes, looking at new types of equipment and systems, and indeed collaborating with new partners. The Automotive IT International Conference, meanwhile, explores how advances in IT and digital tools impact the entire automotive enterprise. So you're going to hear from CIOs, from engineers and software developers about the platforms, systems, and agile processes helping to shorten development cycles, capture more data from sensors in production and logistics, and changing vehicles and mobility altogether. So again, this is a chance to share insights, best practice, and business opportunities, and indeed to get inspired from one another. Whether that's the technology that can turn a ball bearing into a connected computer, or digital solutions to booking freight, or practical lessons in managing lean inventory. So whilst we're covering different disciplines, as I just outlined, I think it's fair to say that actually more binds these audiences together than separates them. Whether we're talking about big data and analytics, asset tracking, cloud storage, computing, artificial intelligence, blockchain, these are technologies that are just as relevant to supply chain managers as they are to those working in IT and software. Cybersecurity is just as essential, whether we're talking about securing the vehicle, company data, the supply chain, shipping lines. These are all pertinent issues. But I think, for me anyway, the most important thread between these events is actually the new types of partnerships that we're seeing emerge across the supply base, between investors, between traditional firms and startups. When we talk about an agile industry, we're not just talking about software development, we're talking about integration and collaboration between business units, between suppliers, competitors, and new players. So here's really a chance again for those of you working on both sides here to come together and share more about your stories. Together, you're much greater than the sum of parts and services and systems that you're offering. So we hope you'll take advantage of effectively both sides here. A couple of words about that. We'll have some shared sessions where we bring you all together, like we are doing this morning, and we do that again later tomorrow. We'll share networking, but after this session, we'll actually split this room into two, and in the main room, or let's say where we're sat right now, we'll have the supply chain event, and right next door, we'll continue with IT. But whether your badge says Automotive Logistics or Supply Chain, or whether it says Automotive IT International, you're free to move between either sessions, and indeed we encourage you to visit the different disciplines that we're bringing together here. And kind of in that sort of spirit, I thought maybe we can break the ice just a little bit, because sat around you, next to you, behind you is likely to be someone who's working in a different discipline than you are. So again, whether they're in logistics or whether they're in software. So as if we're at Sunday church or whatever the tradition might be, if I can ask everyone to just stand up for a moment. And why don't you just greet your neighbor behind you, hello, introduce yourself, let's... Yeah. Okay, great. So I think I'll just go home now. All right. So that's just a little flavor of what should be happening throughout this event. So I think I've opened up a can of worms here. I'm not going to be able to wrest control. So we'll just carry on. This is the sort of buzz that we expect to be hearing throughout the rest of the day. If I can just ask you all now to take your seats again. Yeah, you are rightfully ignoring me. Okay, fantastic. So again, this is what this event is all about. It's about expanding your reach, looking a little bit outside of the barriers from what you maybe do day to day, and gaining inspiration from the other side here. So thank you for that. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of opportunity to do that. I'm sorry we have to get back to the business at hand near of our session. But throughout the day, we're going to have plenty of exchanges like that, including our coffee breaks, lunches, and this great program we have on tonight. So just a few further points about this event, a couple of maybe housekeeping notes. You're going to hear a lot about digital transformation, it's fair to say, over the next 2 days, and digital tools. But let me be the first to kind of point one out, which is that we have a conference app. So whether you're on the automotive IT or on the supply chain side, you will have gotten a link, which gives you a link to download the app, or you can follow the instructions that you have here. I guess I should actually have said firstly that we have a Wi-Fi code. I'm not sure if can we put together. So if you haven't already, and if you need to use the Y code, here is the network and the password. The password is configit from our gold sponsor configit, and that's with a capital C on the password. So by all means, do connect into the Wi-Fi. And if you haven't already, do download the conference app. This isn't just actually a tool to see the schedule or find out more information about our speakers. You can actually interact with other delegates. You can connect and set up meetings via this app. And you'll be able to ask questions as well. So there's a button where you can ask a question. If you're too shy during the panel to raise your hand, put your question in there, and one of our moderators will do their best to put it to the panel. And we'll also have some polling throughout various parts of the conference. And in fact, in a moment, I'm going to kick us off with a question which we'll do some live voting for. So if you haven't already, take a minute and download that app. And sort of while you're doing that, let me address another very important part of business, which is to thank our sponsors to this event, for which it wouldn't be possible. So we have 2 sets of sponsors, some of which are joined. On the supply chain side, I'd like to thank our premier sponsor, Ryder, who's the premier sponsor of this event for the 3rd time now, and works with us at a number of other automotive logistics events in North America. And they'll be hosting a really fabulous gala dinner that we'll have directly after the 4th session today, this evening. Also on supply chain, we have our innovation sponsor, Sogere, whose Robbie the Robot has been walking around outside, and Sogere will host the Afterglow party, which is basically to ensure that not only do you do business together, but that you dance together, because those who dance together get rich together, as I understand it. So we look forward to that. Also like to thank our gold sponsor, Kinaxis, who is actually gold sponsor across both supply chain and IT. So again, we know there are kind of clear links between this event. And also like to thank our silver sponsors, Evolution Time Critical, ProAct, and OmniID. Now, OmniID, again, is also a silver sponsor of our IT event. And again, on the IT side, thanks again to Kinaxis as gold sponsor, and also our gold sponsor Configit, who's sponsoring the Wi-Fi, and to MHP, who are our local partners here in Atlanta, where they have the headquarters. And also thanks again to silver sponsor OmniID, and Tinoco, and to NextLab. So take an opportunity to visit those of the sponsors that have booths outside. If they don't have a booth, you'll find them here. We can help connect you to them. They have services and specializations critical to the industries that we're talking about here today. That's why they sponsored this event. Before we move on to our first speaker, I did say we wanted to do a bit of live polling. So if you've downloaded the app now, I'd ask you to go into the app, and there's a button for polling. So if you click on that button in a moment, you'll see a question which we're asking you to vote on. And we'll leave this open, so if you haven't downloaded the app yet, again, do it at some point during the session, and we'll leave this question so you have a chance to select your answer as soon as it's back, and we'll show the results at the end of the session. So the question we're asking the audience is where you see the biggest opportunity for your company over the next 5 years. And again, this is for everyone, and it doesn't matter which side of the conference you're participating in. So the questions, the options are, do you see the biggest opportunity for your company in the growth of North American automotive production and distribution? Some of the statistics and forecasts for which we're actually about to hear. Do you see it in automotive expansion in emerging markets? Do you see it in new mobility services, such as car and ride sharing, vehicle subscriptions, et cetera? Do you see it in Internet of Things technology, industrial Internet of Things, whether that's in plants or in vehicle? Or do you see it in data science and analytics? So again, go onto the app, give us your answer. We'll reveal what the collective audience is thinking at the end of the session. I should also mention, actually, that the audience is larger than we see in the room here, because this conference or this session is actually being streamed live on our website. So we have viewers across the world who are able to tune in, and they'll also can participate in this poll. So with that, I'd like to move on to our first panel, or our first speaker. We've got a couple of great speakers for you this morning who are going to outline some statistics and forecasts about the market. We have speakers from the World Economic Forum. We're going to talk to you about collaboration with governments and companies in the mobility and automotive space. And we also have a global tier supplier who's going to share some insights into digital transformation. But our first speaker, who I'm very pleased is joining us here for the first time, actually, is Janet Nitch-Cook, who is Senior Analyst at PwC Autofacts. And Janet leads on forecasts for North and South America. And she's going to tell you exactly what's going to happen in North American and global automotive production, I think, over the next couple of years. So Janet, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well? Louis, Christopher, thank you for having me kick off this conference. My name is Janet Nitch-Cook. I'm an analyst working out of the PwC Detroit office, supporting the automotive consulting practice there. In the next 20 minutes, I will give you an update on recent trends in the global and North American automotive market. As for the sales and assembly figures that you see here and throughout the presentation, these were all developed in-house by the PwC Autofacts team, which is a global team of analysts working particularly on forecasting automotive assembly and trends. So let's get started. What you see here is global vehicle assembly. Our forecast includes light vehicles, which means all passenger vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating under 12,000 pounds. So we do not include commercial vehicles in this forecast. At the close of last year, global light vehicle assembly was 94 million units. By the end of the forecast window, so 2024, in 7 years, it's likely that global automotive assembly will be 115 million units. What's driving this increase? emerging markets. Emerging markets are expected to contribute about 88% of the growth in light vehicle assembly, so that's about 18 million units. Over 30 new plants will start assembling vehicles in emerging markets within the next several years. If we break down this global top line into the regional stories shown at the bottom here, you can see that Asia Pacific contributes an overwhelming amount of growth. So about 14 million units will be coming from Asia Pacific. We do expect some gradual recovery growth in Eastern Europe and in South America, while the growth in the EU stems mainly from the expected adoption of alternative powertrain vehicles. So Japan and South Korea are the only region that we have contracting within the forecast window, as automakers are localizing assembly in other markets. We often get asked how autonomous vehicles will affect this global assembly forecast. So at this point, autonomous vehicles are a de minimis portion of the forecast. There are a host of significant barriers before mass production of autonomous vehicles can make a dent in this forecast. So what are these barriers? Every region will deal with these things in a different way, but some of the barriers include developing the infrastructure, the regulatory environment, the maturity level of the software in these vehicles, the price, and perhaps most importantly, consumers' willingness to buy and use these vehicles. So I'm a motorcycle rider. I feel a tremendous sense of security if I'm driving down the road and I make eye contact with the human person that's driving a vehicle alongside of me, right? We have an over-the-air update instantly when we make eye contact. He knows I'm there, I know he's there. Will that kind of security ever be available in autonomous vehicles? So consumer trust, still a barrier. So now let's discuss North America. What you see here is North American assembly by country, with Canada at the top, the US in the middle, and Mexico at the bottom there. So what's going on in North America? Well, we saw a dip in North American assembly last year, and it's likely that this dip will be extended into this year. So total full year North American assembly this year will likely be around 16.8 million units. Why was there a dip? The dip was entirely a result of a changeover in consumer preferences from cars to light trucks. Okay, so light trucks are expected to improve about 200,000 units from 2017 to 2018, while cars are expected to decline a staggering 500,000 units. Last year, automakers announced several extended summer shutdowns and additional shutdowns to help control car assembly, and we expect similar announcements this year. The growth that you see from 2019 and onwards is coming from an onslaught of new light truck products in North America. So we expect around 25 new light truck nameplates will be assembled in North America. This includes the electric and hybrid crossovers and gas-powered crossovers and trucks, and luxury, non-luxury vehicles. So this will add about 1 million units of assembly of just brand new nameplates. So that's not including next generation releases of already the top selling vehicles in the US. So we can take that top line, that North American top line, and break it down by state here. What you see is the assembly change from 2017 to 2024, assembly increases and decreases by state, with Michigan, Alabama, and California getting the lion's share of new finished vehicle units. So several new plants are coming online in North America, specifically to help support light truck assembly. Automakers are throwing a big right hand here, right? So light truck assembly is expected to improve about 20% in North America within the next several years, while car assembly is relatively flat. There's several drivers of all this investment and growth. The first being tax reform. So tax reform, automakers are incentivized to bring production back into the US. The second is hedging the bets against NAFTA negotiations. So should those negotiations go south, US automakers want to have facilities with capacity in the US. And lastly, the consumer preferences for trucks and crossovers, right? So the US is not the only market to have this preference for crossovers and trucks, but the US market actually requires the largest vehicles, right? So it makes financial sense here for automakers to assemble these large vehicles here. So let's talk about North American sales. Through April, sales are relatively flat at around a 0.2% increase. Our prediction for the full year 2018 is 16.9 million units. So that's a modest decrease from last year's 17.1 million units. So last year, sales were actually boosted by replacement demand after the hurricanes. Barring any major event of that magnitude this year that may boost sales again in 2018, we do expect a decline. Although there is a decline, it's still a strong market. Any benefits garnered from the tax reform on the consumer side are expected to be more than offset by rising interest rates in the US. And in Canada and Mexico, sales are relatively flat as uncertainties around NAFTA negotiation and general US policy do have an impact on consumer sentiment and vehicle sales in those countries. So looking here at historical sales, what you see here on the left is US sales through April 2018 by segment. So now we're at around 68% of the market being light trucks and just 32% of the market being cars. Is this a permanent shift in demand? I was always reluctant to say that this is in fact a permanent shift in demand because there are still possibly some events that may make these lines converge, right? So a drastic rise in fuel prices or alternative powertrain mandates, but these events may have more of an impact globally than in the US. If fuel prices in the US do drastically increase, it's possible that customers will move from the gasoline-powered crossovers to hybrid crossovers. Will there always be a market for entry-level sedans? Yes, but that market continues to grow smaller as the cheaper, smaller crossovers are introduced. So now let's move on to incentive spend. The story here is that incentives in the US are dangerously high. Incentives have a direct effect on residual values of the vehicles and on automaker profitability. So year to date through April, incentive spend is over $3,700 per unit. Last year, because of the strong decline in car sales, car incentives actually surpassed truck incentives, usually because trucks have the higher transaction prices, they get the larger incentives. But this happened because inventories were very car heavy and dealers needed to move these vehicles off of the lots. This year to date, average car incentive spend is about $3,600 per unit, and truck incentive spend is about $200 over that. So in the past 10 years, average transaction prices improved about 25%. The average transaction price for a new vehicle in the US right now is just under $34,000. I think a great back channel indicator of how sales are sustained is this what you see right here. So incentives compared to average transaction prices. At this point, incentives are hovering at around 10% of average transaction prices, and we do expect this percentage to stabilize and not continue to grow because automakers are right-sizing their inventory. So let's move on to discuss inventory. Right now, year-to-date through May 2018, inventory in the US hovers at around 4 million units. So last year, in July 2017, inventory in the US actually hit a record high at 4.2 million units. What we're particularly concerned about is inventory mix, so the percentage of cars versus trucks out on dealer lots. This 4 million units that you see up here consists of about 70% trucks, 30% cars. So this is a healthy inventory mix because it reflects consumer demand. At this point, it's possible that the industry as a whole is establishing a new normal for inventory levels. So because of some of these crossovers and pickups have many more trims and many more custom configurations and engine options, dealers are increasing inventory out on their lots to have the wide variety of offerings available to the customers. Some automakers at this point actually do have an inventory of over 50% cars, and that's troubling because it'll be very difficult to move these cars off of dealer lots no matter how many cash on the hood incentives are offered to the customers. So what's on all US automakers' minds right now is CAFE standard setting. In the eyes of the automakers, it would be nice to have one global standardized set of MPG targets, but there's a lot of regional differentiation at this point. Ultimately, every country has their own supply and demand requirements. We're very far away from a global standard. In the US, the most striking recent development is the lawsuit that California brought against the EPA in an attempt to challenge the EPA's proposal to freeze the targets. So how do we get here? How do we get to a point where our regulators are in a battle with each other, leaving such an uncertain environment for automakers to operate in? So historically, California, under the Clean Air Act, had a waiver to set emissions in the state, and a couple of other states signed on to follow California's policy. They were actually some of the most stringent rules globally, and the Chinese EV policy is being modeled on California's policy right now. So during the Obama administration, NHTSA, the EPA, and California's CARB all came to an agreement on dual fuel emissions and fuel economy standards, creating one national regulatory environment for automakers through 2025. But as part of this agreement, it included a midterm review as to the viability of these standards, and one of the last efforts made by the Obama administration was the mandate that these standards are in fact viable. So what are the agreed upon standards? The light red line that you see here is the agreed upon Obama era MPG targets. Once the current administration entered office, automakers requested a scaling back of these standards and of these targets because of the strong shift to crossovers, to crossover demand. So in April of this year, the current EPA administrator, under the direction of the presidential administration, deemed that these standards were in fact not appropriate and should be revised. And now a draft proposal from the EPA is circulating, implying that the EPA wants to freeze these standards at the 2020 level, so the gray line that you see on the screen. That's why the lawsuit was brought about. So this new freeze, it directly opposes California standards and climate change initiatives. Automakers are caught in the middle here. The Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers did release a statement, of course, stating that a national one standard is the preference. So what's at stake? California and the states that follow it represent a third of the US market. What's at stake here is that the US could potentially be split up into two markets, and some automakers will be prohibited from selling vehicles in some states. So lastly, right now is a good point in time for us to talk about alternative propulsion. So what you see here is our global alternative propulsion forecast, with North America in the red there, the EU in the blue, and Asia Pacific in the light green. Alternative powertrain as a whole, what's included in here includes fuel cell vehicles, electric vehicles, mild and full hybrids, and plug-in hybrids. So why does it look like North America is lagging behind in the transition over to alternative powertrain? Because in the US, consumers really dictate the pace of this change, and U.S. consumers do not prefer alternative powertrain vehicles. Sales of alternative powertrain vehicles at this point represent about 3% or just under 3% of the market, compared to the EU, which is committed to combating climate change and has to deal with the fallout of the diesel cheating emissions scandals. And in China, which is fighting heavy smog in its cities and that has the power to unilaterally impose production quotas on the automakers there. So the US is an outlier in this forecast. This forecast reflects the current state of things. So assuming that the national standards are carried to term through 2025, regardless of what happens, the number of electric and hybrid vehicle assembly will go up. In the US, the regulatory side may dictate the pace of that growth, but alternative powertrain vehicles are here to stay. So thank you very much for listening to me this morning. Louis, I think we're going to have a discussion. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Louis Yakumi. I'm the publisher of the Automotive Logistics Group, and therefore organizers, particularly of the Automotive Logistics Supply Chain portion of the conference. Just a couple of things. Firstly, I'd like to, we missed out the sponsor when we were giving out the lists earlier, and a very important sponsor, CMW, Courier Network, are global sponsors of our conference, which means they're called global sponsors because they sponsor all of our conferences around the world. So it's particularly important that we don't miss them out. And also, as part of the Automotive Logistics Group, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our editor, our new editor to Automotive Logistics, taking over Christopher's job, as Christopher's now become content editor for the whole group. I'd like to introduce Joanne Perry. Joanne's, as I said, the new editor of Automotive Logistics Group, and she'll be chairing some of the sessions later on. So she's the lucky lady who gets to work with us. So now just time for a quick Q&A. I think that the presentation was very interesting to give us an idea of where we are and where we think we're going. How anyone can forecast anything in the automotive industry at the moment has got to be tough, but given us a good indication there. And of course, this is your chance to ask some questions as well. So if you've got a question, please raise your hand. Wait for the microphone to come to you so we can hear you clearly. Say your name and your company name, and then, excuse me, and then ask a question. Or you can make a comment as well. It doesn't have to be a question if you agree or disagree with anything that's just been said. And as Christopher mentioned earlier, we've got the app as well, so you can pose questions on the app, which I can see. I can barely see because I'm using a small phone, or rather, I'm using a phone and I'm an old man. But you can use the app to pose a question as well. So I think that my first question that I'd like to pose to Janet is really around a few people have said just in the cocktail reception and in the coffee breaks, should they be preparing for a downturn? You kind of indicated it would be smooth and maybe a slight drop. Should anybody be concerned to be preparing for a downturn?
That's a good question. So if you asked me this question maybe 4 years ago, the official response would have been 2018 is very likely to be the recession year. We were going to have a recession in 2018. Everybody get ready, right? It's very difficult to predict, but it's likely that the downturn will be gradual and not as drastic as the most recent downturn. The markets do work in a cyclical way. We are expecting and anticipating a downturn. Sales are declining. So in the US, it's very possible that a gradual decline within the next several years is here, yes. Okay,
thank you. Again, any questions from the audience? And if my team can help me as well, because the spotlights are very bright. So if I can't see a hand up, please make sure that it's clear. Hello. I think there's a question at the back here. So again, if you can say your name and the company name, and then please ask the question.
Good morning. My name is Ben Patel. I'm with Tenneco. I had a question. Does PwC have a view on, as the shift in ownership goes from individual to fleet, as the Uberization of the world happens and shared mobility, what does that do to the build and the forecast of what's going to happen?
I'm sorry, there was feedback.
I think that with the question, the shift from private ownership to more fleets and even ride sharing.
Correct.
Okay.
What impact will that have on some of the numbers?
Okay, sure. So that's a good question. At this point, it has a very de minimis impact. So I think in 2016, the percentage of ride-sharing miles in the U.S. were about 0.4% or 4% of the total miles driven in the U.S. were ride-sharing. So at this point, there is a lot of hype about it. Everybody's, of course, preparing for it. There is still uncertainty as to the adoption of these vehicles and whether people will let go of their private cars. In the near term, it's very unlikely that people will relinquish that private ownership.
Okay, thank you. I've got a few questions on the app, but I don't know if anyone else wanted to ask in the room. A good question here from was, what do you think is the largest variable that can change the market? You know, is it oil prices? Is it regulation? What do you think might be something that can change your current forecast?
That's a good question. It used to be fuel prices, right? So the American market is very reactive, right? So the moment that fuel prices increased, historically, people would go out and purchase the smaller, more efficient cars, and then when fuel prices dropped, everybody will go out and purchase SUVs instantly, right? So at this point, really, just the sentiment in general, I think, is a good indicator. Employment, anticipation of a recession, right? So the economy in general is a much bigger factor than just fuel prices. And again, as I mentioned, it is possible that people that have gasoline-powered or trucks and crossovers will move to the same vehicles that are powered by alternative powertrain because they are available now. They were not available in the past when fuel prices spiked. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that was good. I think I'm going to have to stop the Q&A now because we've overrun a little bit. But we have got a lot of questions on the app. So you'll be able to see the questions on the app as well. So you can have a look at them. Janet's contact details were at the end of the presentation as well. So, you know, I'm sure, you know, Janet and PwC will be happy to answer any of your questions. And of course, after this session, there's a coffee break and lunch breaks and so on. So please take the opportunities to ask any more questions directly to Janet. So I thought that was a great and interesting presentation, a good start to the conference because at the end of the day, everything we're talking about the future, but everything that we're going to be discussing here is based around vehicle sales and vehicle production. So, you know, anything we do has got to be to support where that's going. So that was a good and interesting start to the conference. So thank you very much, Janet, for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to welcome the next speaker for this session, Eric Jillard, who's the head of automotive industry for the World Economic Forum, famous, I guess, particularly for their Davos conference, but it must be a great pleasure for Eric to actually, they do Davos, which is a good conference, to be at one of our conferences, which is truly world-class. Happy to welcome him to the stage. So thank you, Eric Jillard. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
Hi. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So, as you said, my name's Eric Jillard. I'm with the World Economic Forum. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about the transformation of mobility that I think we're all experiencing ourselves right now, something we call the 4IR, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and also the need for public and private cooperation to sort of steer the implementation of these new technologies toward an outcome that's probably better for people and for the planet. When I tell people I work for the World Economic Forum, I get sort of a spectrum of responses, right? Sometimes it's just a blank stare, like, I've never heard of it. It's not that big of an organization. And others definitely focus in on Davos. I mean, it's the thing that we're most famous for. And it's a big part, well, it's a critical part of the value proposition of the forum. It's certainly not the only one. The World Economic Forum exists for almost 50 years now, and I'm hands off now. I'm not sure what's going on with the presentation. It exists for almost 50 years, really to convene businesses together with governments and regulators, civil society institutions, and academia, with the intention to sort of discuss, debate, and hopefully advance solutions to some of the world's most challenging issues. All with, as you see in the logo, a commitment to improving the state of the world. We look at the world through a system of, actually as a system of systems, and the system I'm focused on is mobility. And so at Davos, and actually in 2 weeks from now, we bring together chief strategy officers of all of our partner companies, which include most of the top OEMs and some top suppliers as well, to talk about some of the most important issues facing the industry with the intention of, again, figuring out an annual agenda of projects that work to advance solutions. When we look at the, we brought our CEOs together in Davos a couple of years ago, and they asked us to really work to explore what would happen to urban mobility, what's happening in the system of urban mobility going forward. And we really see 6 key trends, which I wanted just to refer to. One is this continued trend toward urbanization. And mega cities are popping up all over the developing world, and the UN estimates that an additional 2 billion people will end up in cities in the next couple of decades. So there's just this trend toward cities, and that drives a demand, overall demand in mobility. That, together with global economic growth, leads to some of the outcomes like pollution and congestion that I think are some of the negative externalities that we're hoping to address. The third trend, climate change and the clean air agenda, for sure. We've just heard a little bit about that. And we think that that's going to really, over time, and especially outside of the United States, drive a shift in the way we move people and goods around cities. The fourth and fifth trends, this idea of evolving customer preferences, and the fifth one about new business models, and again, what we'll refer to as the fourth industrial revolution, those two almost work hand in hand, right? Customers have new choices because of the technological and business model innovation. Because there is a Zipcar or an Uber, you might make a different decision about whether or not you want to purchase or lease a vehicle for yourself. And the sixth trend, which is always there and continues to be important, is the potential for economic savings. I mean, transportation in the US accounts for an estimated 15 to 20% of a household budget. And I think if there are ways that customers can make transportation and their own personal mobility more efficient, they will. And so those are some of the key drivers that we see. Now, I've mentioned this concept of the fourth industrial revolution, and let's just kind of quickly review. There have been 3 prior industrial revolutions that have had a significant impact on the way we move people and goods. The first industrial revolution, brought about by the steam engine, really led to steamships and obviously rail, and allowed people to go much further and faster than they could before. The second industrial revolution brought electricity and therefore the ability to bring some of those rails underground and into cities with trams and subways, and also brought about the industry that we care about so much, the automotive industry. And the third industrial revolution really led to, brought about by information technology and electronics, led to the efficiency of transportation by air. But we think the fourth industrial revolution is going to be different. And our founder, Klaus Schwab, who founded the forum in the early 70s, wrote a book about this just this year called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And in it, he says that this industrial revolution is characterized by new technologies that fuse physical, digital, and biological in interesting and dynamic ways, and that it will impact all disciplines, all economies, and all industries. And out of this, there's great potential for promise and advancement of all of our industries and also of the quality of life for people on the planet, connecting billions of people to networks, improving efficiency, maybe even reversing some of the ecological damage that we've done to the planet. And in our world, we focus a lot on autonomous transport and the potential positive outcomes of that. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But there are also some big concerns. For sure, there are many companies that won't be able to keep up with the technological change that's happening. They'll make the wrong bets or not make the right not make the right investments, and they won't be able to adapt to these new technologies. And equally of concern is that governments could fail to capture the benefits of these new technologies if they don't adapt the right sort of agile governance structures to sort of keep up and evolve the way that they are able to regulate and steer these new technologies. So a good example of this kind of combinatorial effect of technologies in our industry, there's no better example, I think, than ride-hailing. If you look at the fact that it's really based on 3 different technological innovations, the development of credit cards and payment systems on one hand, the GPS, and the smartphone. And these things were all sort of independently developed with their own use cases and business cases, but combine them together, and you've got an industry, the ride-hailing industry, which is projected to be as much as a $275 or $285 billion industry in just the next few years. And it's an industry that didn't even exist a few years ago. So that's, I think, where you see how rapidly we're changing. And I think this leads to a discussion of transitioning from this old game, the old reliable dynamics of the industry, toward an entirely new state. In the old game, you know, we know this game, right? It's focused on we build a car, we sell it to a customer who owns that car, who drives it themselves. We've focused a lot on mechanical engineering and really making that product the best product it can be. It's about volume. It's about selling more and achieving economies of scale. And the new game is completely different, right? It's about this focus on service, it's on usage and sharing, it's potentially autonomous. It's about software, and it's really about delivering profitable solutions of mobility of people and goods to end consumers. And that transition's happening very, very quickly. And so you can just imagine the tortured conversations that happen in the C-suites of the companies that we all work with as they're trying to figure out, how do I continue to optimize my profit in success in the old game while investing correctly in the new game? And that's not an easy challenge for companies. And if that's not complicated enough, cities are increasingly playing a big role in shaping the future. And there's a whole list of these, but most recently, even in February, you know, in Stuttgart, the home of diesel, really, the German High Court is saying Stuttgart can ban diesels in cities. So this has the potential for a significant impact in supply chain and automotive industries. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, not just in Stuttgart, but around the world. And that's where organizations like the Forum can get involved to bring governments and companies together to explore steering these, again, these technologies in a way that really advances the sort of quality of life in the planet. So I talked before about the project of focusing on urban mobility. We took that project, and in the second year, we really narrowed the focus on autonomous mobility. And so you might ask, why does the World Economic Forum care about autonomous vehicles? But you see on the screen, you know, 8 really key potential advantages: improved safety, decrease in pollution, equitable access to potentially underserved populations of the elderly and the disabled, increased efficiency, and so on. So there's a lot of potential benefits that could come from AVs, you know, sort of intelligently implemented into the world's cities. So we took we brought a bunch of stakeholders together from many companies in this room, as well as a number of other sort of energy companies, telecom companies, and so forth, insurance companies, really any company that's really interested in sort of helping to, you know, sit at the table and steer the way autonomous vehicles are executed, together with the City of Boston and our partner, Boston Consulting Group. And I will mention that we're publishing a paper on this in just the next couple of weeks. So I want to talk about 2 key streams of work that we did on this project, but the actual numbers will be in the report as it comes across. We did a large-scale conjoint study across 3 cities, Boston being one of them, but also Berlin and Shanghai, to get a regional variation. And we talked to 7,000 people across a spectrum of ages, income, gender, and also geography, people living in urban centers as well as suburban. And we tried to sort of get them in the frame of mind of making real trips. So we asked them to think about like real life situations. What kind of trip is it? Is it a commute or is it a leisure trip? Are you traveling alone or with a group? What's the weather like? What time of day? and then laid out a spectrum of sort of 8 different choices, some of which they have today: rail or bus, their own personal car, commuter rail, and then a number of different choices, including now new choices like robo-taxis, robo-shuttles, autonomous vehicles. And we asked them how they would actually, and also the price, which is really important. And what we found is the top 5 findings were cities do move to a significant percentage of mobility on demand. When it's available, people will choose it. And that doesn't have to be sort of AV, that could just still be ride hailing. That may supplant mass transit ridership in some big cities, and I think that's an area of concern for city governments. AV adoption seems to vary across cities, but it seems to be mostly correlated to income level versus anything else. We're seeing that shorter trips are more focused on AV adoption, which makes sense, and maybe music to the ears of some people in the room. A significant percentage still say, I don't care, I still want to drive my personal car. And that's consistent with, I think, the previous speaker, that there are a lot of people who just aren't ready to hand over their keys just yet. The second stream, which is also interesting, is we developed an agent-based model for Boston, where we looked at the city and we were able to model the traffic flows in the streets of cars, buses, pedestrians, everything else. And also we were modeling, the shrinkage of following distance that would be available with AVs and the potential speed increases. Leveraging data from the city, but also logistics companies like UPS and INRIX traffic data. And we used the modal mix that we got from the prior study to say, well, if that's now the mix of what those transport in the city, let's look at the opportunity, what the changes it can make to the flow of traffic. And what we find is that there is the potential to significantly reduce the number of vehicles on the streets of Boston, but that total miles traveled might increase. 1, from increased efficiency, and 2, that you've got a vehicle that's no longer sort of driving you to work and sitting in a parking garage, but it's actually still moving. So that there is this increased overall number of miles. There is the potential to significantly decrease the amount of parking, but the impact on travel time, and I say here needs further exploration. You'll see that there's the potential for improvements in traffic flow, in reduction in time in suburban areas, and maybe it gets worse in urban areas. And that's something where we think there's a real need for cities and regulators together with business to sort of use the levers of policy at their disposal. That might be occupancy-based pricing schemes, it might be converting street parking or creating dedicated AV lanes or routes in order to sort of advance the benefits of AVs and steer, as Robin Chase likes to say, steer toward autonomous vehicle heaven and away from autonomous vehicle hell. And in closing, I think what I'm hoping you'll come away with the understanding as well, that we see public-private cooperation as the key, right? The opportunity for governments to really play an active role together with companies and civil society to help companies embrace the fourth industrial revolution technologies in a way that advances toward cleaner, safer, and more inclusive mobility for the planet. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Eric. If you can join us in the hot seat here for a moment.
All right. Happy to.
Yeah, so again, we'll have a couple of minutes for some Q&A. Same process as before. I just realized that you can't ask any more on the app because I forgot my phone down there. So, so we're going to have to limit that to questions in the room. I'm going to kick us off, though, Eric. I think you mentioned public-private cooperation, and clearly we need the engagement of governments. And there's a sense, how can I put this, that the current administration isn't that interested in global cooperation and agreements, and perhaps particularly on regulatory side is trying to strip them off rather than put them on. So can you give us any perspective on the engagement that the US government is with the forum, and perhaps particularly on these changes in mobility that you described?
For sure, for sure. So actually, just a few months ago in Davos, we had Secretary Chow, the Department of Transportation Secretary for the US, in the room in my Automotive governors meeting. And it's just a fascinating thing to have this small room of sort of 20 people, including a lot of CEOs from the auto industry, but also we were focusing on, we had a big focus on the development of 5G, of V2X, and potentially with 5G. And so you have in the room, you know, Paul Jacobs from Qualcomm and Vittorio Colau from Vodafone. So you've got these really powerful people from the sort of network, the technology companies, the auto companies who might be consumers of that technology with the Secretary of Transportation. And I have to say, there's this interesting tension where she's like, listen, we don't know anything in government. You guys are the ones who know what's happening out there, and we want to listen to you and be responsive. We want to be a very business-friendly administration. And what you're getting from the other side is, yeah, that's great. That's really cool. But we also need some guidelines. You know, we need to know that we need a little more regulation and leadership from the federal government. So I think the government is trying to play a positive role. Elaine Chao said there's going to be another AV standard. I think that they'll roll out in as soon as September, and I think you'll find it's much more sort of giving direction, but not being very prescriptive. They're really trying to be business friendly. So I guess we'll have to see how that works out.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, we're talking about different cooperation, and you mentioned obviously getting the CEOs of big automotive companies involved. I think one of the things, particularly when we're talking about digital transformation and IT side, we're talking about ecosystems of many new players, right? Startups, big tech firms, all kinds of non-traditional players.
Right.
To what extent is the forum engaging with some of these new players, trying to attract them, and likewise, what's pulling them to your organization? So
there's a couple of programs that we offer. One is we have a program called the Tech Pioneers. And it's companies are nominated to be part of Tech Pioneers, but then they're able to sort of be part of our platform and have access to some of our digital tools and access to forum partners, but even potentially to come to Davos as well. And I think that's a real interesting opportunity for the small companies that are going to be critical shapers of the next generation of mobility. And we've also just opened in San Francisco something we're calling the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is really focused on bringing together, they like to say more of a do tank versus a think tank environment, companies that are shaping this next generation and of things like blockchain, IoT, autonomous vehicles, commercial drones, which is a really interesting use case as well. And so in those cases, if you say we're just looking for that sort of traditional forum partner of a $5 billion plus kind of global corporation, you're going to miss a lot of innovation. And so that's a big part of why we focused on San Francisco and how we're using that center to bring in emerging technology companies as well into the conversation.
Fantastic. Maybe there's time if anyone has a question from the audience. And again, as Louis mentioned, I might need some help seeing the hand because I'm a bit blinded by the light here. But if not, I think I want to thank you, Eric. That was a very interesting presentation. Thank you for sharing that with us. This goes for all of our presenters, those who at least agree to release the presentation. We will distribute them to all of you. So you'll receive an email probably early next week with a link, and you can view. I saw some of you furiously taking notes or snapping photos. So you will get the presentations or get a chance to dig in there. And again, if you have questions for Janet or for Eric that you didn't want to post here, please do find them. Before I bring on our last speaker of the session, I want to remind you again about our live poll. Again, you'll find that in the conference app. There's a little button called polling. Just go in there and let us know where you think the biggest growth opportunity is going to be for your company over the next 5 years. Ours is definitely going to be in visual tech because the screen seems to be flashing on and off and again there. So do let us know. So it's really my great pleasure to welcome our next speaker who flew in, I believe, last night just from Paris, and we've caught him on the way to Tel Aviv, I think, to the next. So there's this usual tech loop of Paris, Atlanta, Tel Aviv, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But he's the group CEO of Faurecia, and he's responsible for the global IT organization. He's also driving digital transformation across Faurecia, which of course is top 10 tier supplier and very large in the interior space. So a very exciting position and a very exciting time for the company. He's also, as he told me last night, a very passionate, self-defined geek. So I think, so you got to get a chance to hear some of the passion that comes there. It's really my pleasure to welcome René Dijs, the global CEO of Faurecia. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
My name is René Dijs, and I'm proud to say that I'm not only a geek, I'm a nerd. I'm really proud of this. By the way, Janet, nice presentation. I really liked your idea of over-the-air update and the eye contact, but I have to tell you, you're wrong. You know, AI is all about guessing what the human will do before the human knows. So you are at best too late. And I would like to talk about digital transformation. And in this, Eric, thank you for the framing the whole subject. It looks like you gave the frame, the content, the environment, and I talk about one specific use case in a company, Faurecia. How are we going to do this? How are we going to apply the principles, and how are we going to follow the trends? And me being the CIO and also driving digital transformation, I was asked by the CEO of the company more than a year ago, come on board and help us to accelerate and set the priorities. And I guess I have something like 15 minutes and a presentation that's worth 1 hour. So I bring a bit of principles, if we have the time, also some real use cases, what we do in terms of digital transformation, and also a bit of how we frame how we answer the trends and what Faurecia what our company is doing. So who are we? Faurecia, just quickly, it's this one. Overview. We're providing 2 product offerings that help every car maker in the world to sustain the mobility and also to have a smart life on board. Sustain mobility, that means basically we are a top 10 OEM player. I go quickly about this one because I would like to talk about the digital transformation more than the company, but it's important to understand that what we produce the interior of a car. And we produce clean mobility exhaustion pipe systems. So basically, if you open the door of a car, you get into it, you touch and feel products of our company. So in a way, we could say we sell the emotions of a car. We are a leading player in both business groups, and we are a trusted partner in like all the OEMs in the world. And we say that 1 out of 3 vehicles are equipped with a Faurecia product. So if you're interested, anywhere you rip up the seat and you really tear everything apart, then you'll find our logo somewhere in the mechanics of a seat, but not on the outside. So, data-driven economy. There's a quote, this is a quote you find on the internet, that right now it's not so much about the biggest beats the smallest, it's about the fastest beats the slow. That's easy said, but not so easy done. So what do we as a company, what do you as a company, what do we need to do to follow this principle and create a digital transformation? And I always like a list of 3 elements. The first of all, it's very important to understand it's about data. In the past, it was about supply chain optimization, process optimization, implementing in IT and finding the best solution to be faster, reduce costs, create more quality. Don't get me wrong. Also today we have to do this. But in addition, now we have to ask ourselves, what are the data we're going to collect? So what are the sensors? How many sensors? Where do I place these sensors? What is the least amount of sensors with the maximum amount of applications, because it's cost for production? And what are the applications that our company can dream of creating value? And what are the possible ecosystems we are creating in which even more value is created? So it's about collecting data and thinking about what is the value to be created. And the second is drive process efficiency and at the same time drive the automation level. And that's an interesting question. This, by the way, a new shift of paradigm. In the past, we were, as I said, optimizing a process. And now we are optimizing a process to a certain extent. And then we ask ourselves, why don't we stop optimizing, just automate it? Because at the end of the day, if a bot is doing the job, it could be the second best optimized process. And what I say is it sounds so simple to just collect data. But you need to sit down, or in my company, in our company, I need to sit down with the CTO of the company and we need to discuss what are the sensors? How do we implement these into the process of our product creation? There are teams that create the fine products we're going to sell, and next to these teams are other teams that think about what is the digital service we will create on top of it to make it more appealing, to create a USP, to be fast on the market, to address a different market segment. So that means we have to change the organization, and believe me, radically. So every aspect of the organization, if you want to automate your accounts receivable, by the way, I bet with you in some years, the job of accounts receivable will cease to exist, will be taken over by bots. So if you want to do this, you have to talk differently with finance people. If you would like to create the new products together with digital teams, you need to provide all of a sudden platforms, frameworks in which people, maybe in no-code programming, can create the first MVP. All of a sudden, and I told the CEO of our company, in a dinner, in Paris, if you work in Paris, by the way, you always have nice dinners, it's very nice, you should do that. I told him, you know what, we are right now 100,000 associates, and I'm pretty much convinced that in future, and future is like 3 years, 5 years from now, everybody will work in IT. Everybody. Not for me, don't get me wrong, I'm humble. But they will work not in the IT department, but work IT. And compare this back to the 70s, 80s, where all of a sudden all secretaries used to have a typewriter. Then the computer was placed on the desk of the boss, and the secretary had no job anymore because the boss was taken over. Then the computer was taken out again, and then the secretary was working in IT. By the way, the first boost of the amount of IT jobs created. And the same is happening right now. So we have to change the organization. So what does it mean? And I love three, this is what I love. Digital transformation is all about 3 things. It's, where do we start? Revenue increase. So we ask ourselves, what are new markets by means of digital services we can create? What is a meaningful value service for either our end customers or B2B for the customers? The next one is cultural switch. We have to think about how can we guide a whole organization towards the new. And the new is Scrum, is UX-driven methods, onboard AI scientist, data scientist. AI is the new normal. We will ask in some years, why did we do still some software programming as we used in the past, and everything will be the new digital service. And then cost efficiency is all about all the internal processes to increase the level of automation. On shop floor, you have AGVs, or robots like you see outside driving through plants, and you increase the level of automation because that is you count the monies. And I will have some example about this one. So what's the culture shift? Most of you know this. This is very CIO-oriented. This is the world we're living in. We have, with our legacy, typically, at the end of the day, it's systems. Systems need to talk to each other, and you have to somehow make sure that you use your limited resources, budget, and people to create the shift towards new services. What is new? Of course, everything is connected. Everything needs to be aligned. We talk about MES systems with paperless flows on shop floor. We talk about bots introducing, taking over support chains. We're talking about predictive monitoring solution, and I have some examples of what we do at Faurecia. So this is the legacy we have to perform. But the real priorities are, in an organization, not necessarily the IT organization, we need to introduce an organizational setup that enables us to quickly form teams and play startup. That's why all of us right now scouting incubators and accelerators, because this is our way to access innovation from the market to the company. And this is outside-in innovation. Also, if I look just to the IT organization, the cultural shift is as follows. In the past, we were buying software and license, and then the internal organization integrated this into the processes. So we were acting as a system integrator. Most of us are doing it today. But in future, this is not the case anymore. In future, you have cloud-based software solutions, SaaS. And logistics department come with good ideas and have this clever startup company that has exactly the solution to exactly good problem, and we need to enable them to provide the solution to the company. So all of a sudden, it's not so much integrating processes. It's more like having architecture and making sure that you get the outside-in innovation. And as an example, what I've done, I created a value creation office in my CIO organization where all partners are being valued in terms of how fast can we get the innovation into our company. And the typical question we're asking is, SAP, we all play with SAP. What is the innovation of SAP? And how can I increase the benefit and the value of this innovation? Not so much how much ABAP do I have to create a software to change this innovation and integrate it into our processes and then have a completely own software. No. Ask, how do I have to change my organization to increase the value of this innovation? And this is true from smart startups, for universities, and for big customers that are partners. And you said it also as one of the threats. Security is a threat, but we have to see it as a business enabler, and it needs to be part of any strategy because we all produce digital solutions. And there are two threats. One is, of course, the hacking. You know, by the way, there are two kinds of companies in the world. Those who have been hacked and those who don't know that they have been hacked. That's it. So we need to apply all the common standards on security, without a doubt. And also we need to make sure that the internal processes are set up in such a way that we are able to cope with new regulations. In Europe, we are right now anxiously awaiting GDPR. And I don't know how you feel. Most of us don't know what it really means, but we try. But it must be part of the architecture of future solutions. It's a very important technology bridge, and it needs to be owned by the company. It cannot be just bought. Mobile first, cloud as a standard, okay, that we all know. And then in future, it's all about artificial intelligence. When I drive home on my commute, all of a sudden I see big posters asking for local companies trying to hire software engineers. I mean, if you all look back 10 years from now, everybody was giving all software to India. Now we try to get them back here. And it's about having, it's about the fast beats the slow. So it's imperative to have the know-how in your teams. And I advise everybody, either IT organizations or any kind of organizations, invest in this software development know-how because this will be your differentiating factor of the future. And we talked about AI at the breakfast. I was shocking some people about what AI is doing. I gave you an example. But AI is nothing. Believe me, it's nothing against the revolution that blockchain will bring to us. It is nothing. Blockchain will be the ERP for connected ecosystems, and then we will have a new way of trusted business with all of us. So, imperative, I encourage everyone to create an own blockchain program office and implement some solutions. We do that. As I'm running out of time, let's look a bit. Now we have culture shift. We could talk a lot about how to set up the organization, how to implement agile methods, how to enable fast communication, how to enable always-on digital communication. What are the tools, the platforms you're using? What is the architecture, some basic decisions, and then let go and let everybody become an IT nerd, like me. So what we do right now, also to not say we're talking about ideas, some concrete examples. And as I said, there are two elements. It's the cost efficiency, which is the automation level in our production. And then it's the revenue increase, which is new value spaces, new ways of creating business. On cost efficiency, I love this. This is like an architecture, but I guess I'm the only one who loves architecture in this room. But it's important to have one, and it's important to capture the idea of the traditional business models and the new business models, and to have an ERP next to a data lake. So maybe about Faurecia, we are close to 300 plants worldwide. We have lots of shop floor machines. I call them even archaeological machines. Some are more than 30 years old. And it's very interesting to connect them, by the way. It's a very tedious task. So we have a data lake. We're connecting the machines as I speak. They're not all connected. We're on the process of connecting them. And they send data to our data lake. And now we ask certain questions. How can we reduce scrap? How can we increase quality? And so on and so forth. And we have a clear architecture that's applied everywhere so that the connectivity is once applied everywhere. And then we have one set of AI teams. I will talk about later artificial intelligence and data science teams that work exactly on these data sets and try to solve questions on why is this machine's OEE not high enough. What can we do? And then they apply the solution, and then the good thing is you have 300 plants, you can industrialize and then scale. So the architecture needs to scale. And you see already security is part of our Technobricks, so everything we do is by definition secured. And of course, security is an uphill battle, so you have to improve your security level day by day. And it's the only important part here is to say that we drive everything from a customer point of view. There are some value spaces, and out of these value spaces, we create technology solutions that help to create the market. I'll give you one example. We create the interior of a car. You know, the seats, steering wheel, the panels, everything you can touch. By the way, as a trivia, it's very interesting. Did you ever know these panels that you see in the car in front of you? It must be durable. It must feel good. It must smell good. It is basically, it's used every day. The sun is shining through the windscreen on it. It's very cold. And it's still, if you feel it, it's really, it serves its needs. For me, it wasn't clear prior to joining the company, but it's a really highly sophisticated product. And this we equip with sensors. So you all commute in your car, and we will collect data about you. Some of you have a wearable already. We will collect data with the seat and with sensors in those panels. And we will know your vital signs, and we will know it every day. We know your time spent in the car, we know your weight changes, we know your blood rate, we know your blood pressure, we know your aspiration rate, we know everything, and we can collect it if you want. Only under consent, only if you want. Yeah, no. No, we know. So now guess, you have this data. Now guess you need to go to a doctor. You know, the doctor is really the poorest guy. I don't know whether you know, but this medical science is one of the most unscientific science I can know. The doctor, you know, they go into, they see you basically 5 minutes a year. And they have to guess what's your problem and have to give you a solution right now. Poor guy. So they take, okay, take 2 aspirin and come again. Let alone this 2 aspirin thing. If the medication of each patient in the world would be precise, we would save a lot of money. So now let's consider this doctor has an AI solution, and you give access to your private data vault fed by us. And the doctor will say, I know your headache pain, because you go to a treadmill every Wednesday, and I also know, by the way, the data from your weightlifting device in your gym, and you put too much weight on your left shoulder. So don't take an aspirin, just reduce the weight. And these things are, by the way, possible. On the CES this year, our CEO made on a press conference on stage to promise, and we're working on it, our teams are working on it, that the moment you enter our car, you have a state of well-being, you feel certain in a way. You leave the car, you feel better. Because we can assess by means of our sensor data technology your state of well-being. And by the way, very precise. I saw already solutions, it's super exciting. We can see how you feel. And then in the car can make you an offer. So who would pay €5 a month to get an offer like to feel better? You don't need to raise your hands, but I know you want it. So all of a sudden, we can change the position of your seat, we can change the climate, the light settings, the sound settings, anything. Sound, even odor. And all of a sudden, you feel better. And those are, I just gave, you know, it was interesting. And everybody, you are listening right now, you're dreaming, yeah, that could be an idea. Did I tell you I'm the CIO of a company that produces seats, basically, the interior of a car? But I was telling a dream about a complete new business model, a complete new market, a complete new way of creating value. Why? We have sensors, we have data, we have an architecture, and we're working on it. And we call it cockpit of the future. That was why I was talking about it. So you see, it really makes sense to completely shift your mind and think about the new. So going back to the other new, going back to big data methods we have applied to our production lines. There are, and I go quickly about it because the zero, it means I'm running out of time, right? So here you see one of the very fine interiors. By the way, every luxury car, it's ours. I'm so proud about what we do. It looks nice. So we have, those machines are called injection machines. They basically, you inject all the material in your press and you get the panels. the door panels and injection panels. And those are the machines. They have some grinder and some materials, and they have their certain OEE. That was not, okay. Okay, you ran out of, you have to go back now. There's no back button here. So basically what we did is we asked the question, can we use AI and can we use big data algorithms to find out in this injection machine what are the signs we can predict on a certain issue once this machine gets stuck. And there are some OEE issues like we all have in our production. And yes, there are. There's a value tree and I go correlation tree, and we basically, it's again, it's basically we nailed it down to 5, yeah, you see that, 5 basic, I don't see nothing here, okay. 5 basic indicators that gave us an idea, I go here. 5 indicators that gave us an idea on how to basically predict the timeouts of a machine. And so our aim is that we will have kind of a, if you go on, next slide. Try again. Let's see. By collecting somewhere there was the idea that we will increase our productivity on this set of machines by 5%. So this is an example that we have done, we have implemented, and now we are on the way to industrialize this on all similar machines all over the world. And this is pure money. Why do I say this? Of course, we reduce the OEE, the expenses for our production, and at the same time, we can use this money we save to invest into our digital dreams. And that's what we do. And the complete strategy is here written down. Typically, on the machine, we either collect the machine's data itself, or we put sensors on the machines, and then we start collecting and we start asking us questions. By the way, sounds terrific, but it's a very tedious job. It's not so easy. And I would guess that not so many companies as of today really have implemented a lot of successful solutions, because there are so many variables that really needs to be understood, and the resources or the data science itself are scarce. And then the biggest question is, how can I then really industrialize? There you need standards in your production or in any kind of system, because what works here, if you want to make it work there, the system setup should be standard. And it's like the height of the conveyor belt should be the same, the machine, the version of the machine should be the same, the firmware should be the same, and so on. Standard is very important. So we pilot, and then we deploy everywhere. And somehow this system is not working right. And I will skip the slide, I will only tell about it. I'm anyway better in telling the story. So the last idea is we do have an end-of-the-line inspection of our products, or you have the same. And we take pictures, for example, of products we create. And typically at the end of the line, we have 2 operators who scan the products and look for some quality issues, some flaws, some scratches, some, if you have a seat, for example, you have leather on it, and it's like at home, you have to steam any wrinkles away. I know that. So you look for streams, and of course we have a camera, and it's certainly easy to produce all these JPEGs and train an AI model to understand what is wanted, like it's a sue, and what is a wrinkle we don't want. And in the first pilot, we are already in 97 dot something preciseness, implemented as one solution, and now we're rolling it out. And basically that means out of the 2 people at the quality engineers at the end of the line, we can omit 1. Multiplied by all the amount of machines everywhere in the world, it's already something. It's really a very beneficial project. So all in all, we do right now increase quality. And again, but I say it's a long process, not so easy. There are lots of questions that need to be asked. How do all these AI-driven tools work, the tool chain, how do they work with each other? You have PMQ, you have R, you have Python, and you need to also understand the trends of the people working on data science. They also come with their own environments and frameworks, and that all needs to work together. That takes a bit of time. So last but not least, to finish my presentation, I would keep this, and hopefully the slide stays. Okay, here it is. So I was trying to summarize. I was talking about we have to understand the digital change or the digital transformation as an organizational aspect, then you need to apply it to your internal processes, and there you create the first, say, the savings. You create some budget that you can use for revenue increase. And then how about outside business? And remember the story I was talking about, the health and wellness business we are going to pursue. Of course, Faurecia, we are a very good company. We create highest quality products for the automotive, and we have no clue about wellness. So it's obvious that we cannot do it alone. So, and here, this is also one of the new ideas of digital transformation. It's all about partnerships. And we were discussing with many partners. There are many big companies out there who are very interesting, and all of them have very interesting offers. And we decided in our process for Accenture, we engaged into a 5-year contract, and it's about risk sharing. It's very important. So Accenture Venture Capital, Faurecia Venture Capital, we both put money on the table, and then we both grow together a market. We come with the complete know-how of the interior of a car, the sensors, and we can produce basically the solutions. And Accenture comes with an ecosystem and opens doors and has ideas to create this business. And together, I invite you all to our booth on the CES 2019 in Las Vegas. We will showcase then all those solutions I was talking about. The pilots are there, and next year we will show them. And maybe to end, you had this idea with the credit cards. It was the GPS and the phone. And yes, combining, but you missed one element. Maybe you said it later, but it's so important also here that you shift and lift this all into a digital twin. Because in the software virtual world, all the rules don't apply anymore. So we can all of a sudden create one kind of seamless experience to this whole service. And that's the essence. So you have bricks, you lift it in a digital twin, and then you create a solution or a set of solutions that creates a value to any end customer. And this is the new market. And that is something we all do together. Because in this software virtual world, new rules are there, and we will work together. It's about, joint competition, partnerships, whatever. And we will all meet in different setups and go out in different setups. And this, to me, all of it, what I just discussed, is the digital transformation. And this is the dream that we are right now implementing in Faurecia. I thank you very much, and I apologize for being a bit late. Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Arjen Bongard. I'm the editor of Automotive IT. And René tries to get away from me. I interviewed him in Paris a month ago, and he traveled all the way here, and now he gets grilled by me once again. You're a geek, a nerd, an archaeologist, yes. A musician, and a mathematician. Yes. Let's talk briefly about the archaeology. How do you get rid of all these legacy systems? Because you showed this great slide with the iceberg, but legacy systems are to some extent the bane of the existence of the automotive industry. Because if you're not a Tesla, everything you have has been around for decades.
Yes, yes. And I know of other companies, they have systems, for example, in the ERP world, they have like more than 100 productive ERP systems. We are in a very lucky situation. It's not due to, I joined a company that's already embarked on a journey 7 years ago. We have all the 300 plants in one process landscape, one SAP, all implemented and done. We celebrated end of last year the finalization of this big project. So here, in a sense, I'm in a lucky position, and of course, everybody needs to do the homework first. However, if you go this is ERP, if you go one level down to shop floor, then there is no other way but to go plant by plant and do the connection with all the machines. It's a process you have to do, but it's a one-time investment, and then you do.
If you look at the digital transformation very broadly across the auto industry,
yes.
Are we on track? Is it going better, worse, or sort of as expected from your point of view?
Okay, I would say I can't talk about the complete automotive industry, but what I have seen, I talked to some colleagues and everybody's talking about the major trends, like we said, AI, everybody's trying to hire the AI experts, and everybody's talking about blockchain. So I would say from what I heard, we are in the right direction. I was part of a CIO summit where everybody could measure themselves where most of them are in the beginning part. And I guess we need to accelerate to get to benefit. Because in the beginning, it's always about investments. And we need, investments is it's always bad. You need to quickly come to benefits. And that I cannot judge, because this is due to the companies.
And how do you get a company, and your company is part of this challenge, how do you get a company that has been making things forever to suddenly get into something called digital services? How do you do that when you're working with thousands of mechanical engineers who are excellent at making things?
Yeah. And I would love to say it's easy. I did one presentation, everybody applauded and we followed. No, it's not the case, absolutely not. And what we decided is we start with 4 projects, and those 4 projects we focus on, we deliver as soon as possible value to the company. And once you have done, you showcase that you create value, then people are getting more excited about it. But it's of course not to start a big project of a big digital transformation without having a good milestone where you deliver benefit on the way. And it's constantly talking about, and it's a challenge and also a duty in a way for IT people to get out of their IT silo and talk business language. Because I guess that's, most of the board members are afraid because people don't understand. And just only blockchain is so complex and it's so technical and so IT nerdy stuff that you need to get away from the technology and describe the benefit in terms that people can understand. And then only people will get trust to, or management will get trust to invest in digital transformation.
You mentioned blockchain. Do you already have a blockchain application?
Yes, we have a demonstrator in June. It will be ready. Right now we're implementing it and we're doing it with our customers. We're a chosen customer and our suppliers together in the program management on base of a blockchain.
Okay. And I'll give you one last question to the mathematician side of your psyche. Quantum computing.
Yeah.
Just very briefly, because the 0 is very threatening.
Okay. Okay, first of all, I can share, I was able to touch a quantum computer. This really means something to me. I could even explain a bit the concept about it, but it's the exponential growth will be done by linear. So the biggest advantage is to calculate things that cannot be calculated as of today. And the biggest risk is, everybody's saying, is cybersecurity not secure anymore? Because all of a sudden, all these codes can be hacked by a quantum computer. And the answer is no. Because those experts that have created the security or the encryption methods, they have already created the next encryption method that is as hard as quantum computing power will come. And today, I see that universities, you can program solutions on it. But still, it's, as of today, more beneficial to use normal supercomputers compared to quantum. So it takes some years until this technology is available. And this is, by the way, the only really cloud-based service because you need cooling. So you will never have a quantum computer at home. So you can only access via a cloud-based portal, but you can do it today. There are quantum computing IBM offices and there's 2 other companies. And it is the future. That I'm convinced, but it takes some time.
Some time is 5 years, 10 years?
I don't quote me on this money. More
15?
More 10 years, 10 years.
10 years.
10
okay.
years, yeah.
René Dijs, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, what you've all been waiting for, the poll. Can we see some results? And the winner is data science? Growth? Okay. Well, that gives us, oh yes, no, I didn't see the blue line up there. Ah, well, that will give us something to discuss during the upcoming coffee break. Just a few notes. We are going to do something that's been discussed a lot in this country in the past 18 months. We're going to put up a wall here, and it'll go right here. So when we come back in a little less than an hour, we will have one side will be the supply chain conference, the other side will be the Automotive IT International Conference. Therefore, it is best if you take your things with you so that you don't end up on the wrong side of the wall. However, as Christopher pointed out, it's not the end of the world because the wall can be breached at any given time by anyone. So thank you very much for attending the first hour of our conference. I think we're off to a very good start. We've covered a lot of ground, and the scene has been set for 2 days of very interesting onward discussions. So we'll see you back here in an hour. Thank you.